In what was undoubtedly one of the greatest nights in Arsenal's recent history, they thrashed Real Madrid and proved to everyone that they can compete at this level. Now in this video we're going to talk about the brilliance of young Myles Lewis-Skelly and how yet again he proved his insane come up was not a coincidence to give Arsenal the win. So let's get into it. Now of course this was one of them games where people really started to take note of Arsenal. Not only did they thrash the European champions on the ball and off the ball and should have scored more on the night, it was a day of come-ups for a lot of players, being Declan Rice, Myles Lewis-Skelly and Bukayo Saka really starring for the team despite having criticism recently from non-Arsenal fans. Now as someone who watches Arsenal every single game, I knew that we were definitely capable of a result like this, but to see it in motion and to actually have the emotion of the game happen, it is definitely an enlightening moment for the club and hopefully something they can take with them to the Bernabeu and into the future of this competition and next season, because we definitely do have that ability. Now that is the same with young Myles Lewis-Skelly, who despite being portrayed as a thug and someone that is badly tempered within the Arsenal team, he is actually one of the best players in this squad. And yet again, this performance I think was completely outstanding, that proves that he is Arsenal's starting left back for now and potentially a starting midfielder for the future, which is brilliant to see. Now first of all, I want to get into some of the tactics of his positioning. Arteta's tactics in the entire game were brilliant. I thought how Arsenal sort of actually pressured Real Madrid a lot and got a lot of players within them central areas was very important, because we knew that people like Rodrigo and Vinny Jr. weren't going to come back and mark us, and this is something I spoke about before the game. Real Madrid do not want to defend. Their attackers are brilliant going forward, but they're not going to have that effort going defensively or know how to press, which is obviously something that Bukayo Saka and Martinelli both have, which is underrated. Now what Arsenal did in this game isn't too dissimilar to a lot of their games, but it was a little bit different how it worked. We ultimately had the 3-2-5 setup, but in order for Arsenal to make this work, we had Marino come a lot deeper and sort of sit as a central midfielder to Rice and Odegaard. If you look at the average position of Marino, he's ultimately not even playing up front really. Now this was very important because it allowed the wingers Saka and Martinelli to get further forward and have one-on-ones, because them half channels we occupied by Arsenal. It also made it very hard for people like Modric and Cavaminga to block, because they had to cover 3 players and they were ultimately overmarked in this game. Now what we did here was very interesting. We had Lewis-Skelly come into the double pivot with Partey, which is something we have seen before, but ultimately this was the biggest surprise for Rodrigo within the team. He was supposed to mark Lewis-Skelly, you would think, most of the game, because that is obviously his man and he is that left back and he's the right winger, so it kind of works into that one-to-one nature. But many times when Rice came into this position, he did not know whether to go towards Rice and stay tight to him or go to Myles. At the start of the game you can see him getting the problems over and over again, and he would stay on Rice and then tuck in tightly to get to Myles Lewis-Skelly, and then we would just pass it around them, and it became easy for Arsenal to shift the ball around Rodrigo to Rice in them half channels where he could continually just run the ball forward. Now of course we'll go into Rice, that will be out before this, so hopefully go and see that. So if you want to see my opinion of the Rice game, which is also excellent. But speaking about Myles Lewis-Skelly, yeah, I think he really took this mantle and did a great job with it. Now the first thing that Myles Lewis-Skelly is really good at is picking the ball in these channels, and when they do run at him and they are very quick to mark him and block him down when they were, especially early on, he can withhold tackles on him and keep that ball even if he's being pressed very highly. This is why you want him in maybe a midfield position in the future, or at least double pivoting coming into that centre. He is probably the best player in the team of regarding press resistance and being able to not only carry that ball forward or go down as a foul if it's just a little bit too much. Now I think Partey in this game also did a brilliant job at this, and there's a few runs he did, and we know prime Partey could do that brilliantly, but unfortunately with his age and his physicality, it definitely has been a drop off this season overall. Not been the worst, of course, I'm not saying he's a liability there, but I still think that compared to Myles Lewis-Skelly right now, Myles is that one that you want really making them forward runs. And we saw this throughout the game be a very big imperium to Arsenal getting forward. There'll be times where Odegaard would come back or even Rice to help the ball retain it, and you would see Partey move into that back three to kind of block Mbappe and help the 2 centre backs go out wider, so then you could get one of the fullbacks up as well, being Timber usually, and then Lewis-Skelly would come into that central of the pitch and then he would be able to take the ball within space and run forward. There was a few times yet again where Rodrigo was just not close enough to him. I think he was in 2 minds whether to go and get Rice, because Modric was not picking up Rice half of the game, and he was mostly leaving Rice and then going to Myles Lewis-Skelly late, so he wasn't really recovering for either, and Myles was doing brilliant to carry that ball forward into them areas. And obviously the talk around Arsenal struggling against mid-blocks has kind of dominated this season, but it is very important to highlight that it is against physical mid-blocks, not just mid-blocks in general. This Real Madrid mid-block I thought was pretty awful. It was kind of a low block at times. They were coming very deeper, but they just weren't willing to put the effort into run and really put any pressure on the ball. This put a lot of moments where you would see Mbappe just run into Party or try and win that ball back by himself and have no backup from his midfielders, where we'd be able to easily pass that ball into Myles Lewis-Skelly between the lines. And then when Myles Lewis-Skelly has this room to basically have the ball within the channel at the centre of the pitch, he can even run with it, which we saw multiple times in this game of him just taking players on and be able to run at them, which I thought was incredible. But also, more importantly, he can make them line breaking passes. There was a few progressive passes he made in this game were excellent. He was putting the ball through. We had Rice running from a deeper position, yet again not being picked up between the lines, and they were confused, the two defenders, because Mourinho was coming so deep and people like Cavaminga were trying to pick up Mourinho, and it was kind of blocking them from actually really stopping Rice, especially when Rodrigo or Modric didn't know where to go or stay still. And not only do you have Mourinho in the centre kind of occupying that midfielder, and you have Rice, Odegaard in them half spaces out wide, and then Saka and Martinelli even further out wide. If you're not going to put any pressure on Myles, he will have a lot of touches on the ball and he'll figure things out to get through. There was moments where they would lose Mourinho in the centre and he'd find a ball, but there was also moments where he was able to pass it into the half channel on the left or the right to Odegaard or Rice, who were able to get that ball into Saka, and then Saka and Martinelli in these moments had their one-on-ones, which they were able to be pretty effective from, I think, especially Saka when he came centrally with the ball, and even out wide, he was so good at just running at players throughout it, which gave Arsenal many options to also get their fullbacks up. And in these attacking positions, Myles Lewis-Skelly was also excellent. There was many times where Arsenal, yet again, like we said, had progressed the ball. There wasn't really much pressure. Real Madrid were getting pushed back and back and back and still not going towards the ball. And Arsenal would put the ball out to Martinelli, and there's a few times where he would run into the channel and put that ball in, and brilliant. I loved it when he did that. But if you see, when the first time he does that in the first minute, you see Rice pointing to the backwards of Myles Lewis-Skelly. This to me is quite a clear indication that this was a pattern that they had spoken about before the game, and they wanted to put that quick ball into Myles because they knew Rodrigo wasn't going to pick Myles up, in which he didn't. He went towards Rice and then went out to Martinelli, kind of ball watching and ball following, and then that half channel was always open for Arsenal to operate in. We saw this a few times where it wasn't used, and like we said, Martinelli took that on himself, but there was a few times where it was used. Rice continued his run, then they go to Myles Lewis-Skelly, he puts that brilliant line breaking ball through, which became quite a few problems for Real Madrid. But I think Arsenal also took this opportunity, and in the second half you saw Myles getting into much more, half spacey, more central areas, I like to call it, where he was actually being able to involve around a lot more of the pitch. Instead of having Martinelli really run at the wingers from wide positions, which did work to a certain extent, it was causing a lot of problems in the middle because Real Madrid had a lot of men in there. So what we actually did to kind of counter that was put Myles Lewis-Skelly in more of a central area, know that Mbappe isn't going to come back and pick him up, because when does he ever, and force Rodrigo to go even further out wide by pulling Martinelli towards him. Many times where Martinelli had the ball, Rodrigo and Valverde would come out towards him, and Arsenal would do the typical thing that they do quite a lot, where they get a lot of their players to go back post to wait for that sort of cross in there. Not only does this give the opportunity for Arsenal to cross it back post, this worries Real Madrid. So you see a lot of the time where Arsenal have Saka, Odegaard and Mourinho sort of occupy further away, that all the Real Madrid players actually go into that area. Now this is something Arsenal have done a lot. We did this against PSV quite a lot in that first leg as well, where we pulled everyone forward and allowed Rice to make runs even forward into them half channels or make that ball through. And because Myles Lewis-Skelly now was in a bit more of an elevated half position play and Modric still wasn't really close to him, there's a few times that he was able to put the ball through to Rice, and Rice almost scored, had a good shots, and they had to come over and block it. And there's a few moments that we got in. And we've been speaking about wanting to get Myles Lewis-Skelly in more attacking positions, and I think over the last month and a half he has been a real good player in attacking areas. We saw it for England, we've seen it for Arsenal for consistent, and it is definitely a part of his game which I've already seen an immense improvement from when he came into the team. And I think the biggest indication of that is this move here, where he picks the ball in the half channel. You see people making runs. You've got a lot of space in front of him, but Rice hasn't made that run just quite yet because he's coming from a wider position, and he just runs through the middle of them. This happened a few times in the game, but this one I think is the clearest one where you just think the talent is there. He takes on Cavaminga, he kind of pushes the ball past him. I think it goes under Cavaminga's legs. He then holds off Vinny Jr. and then forces Valverde to come forward because he's still got that ball. He's still got it in his control with his brilliant body ability of just keeping it and being able to physically withstand all this pressure. And then he's able to put a brilliant pass through, a little touch through the legs of Valverde again, again, and that puts Martinelli through, who has a shot, which is a good save. This whole move is basically created because Myles just goes, I'm just going to run at them and see what happens. And this happened a few times in the game. There's one as well in the first time where he would just keep running at them and keep, keeping the ball. Sometimes it's not always going to work. Sometimes you run yourself into problems, like we saw against West Ham when he tried to run past Kudus and then gave away that red card. I'm not saying that's never going to happen, but when you can do that so successfully, I've said this over and over again, you want him trying it. And sometimes it might not play off, and there's certain situations I guess you could argue you shouldn't do it, but the confidence that he has to do this and the ability he has to do this against real men and real professionals at the age of 18 is incredible. And it's such a big thing that Arsenal have needed. Not only have we needed more people to carry that ball, and I think not only him, I think Rice carried the ball brilliantly in this game, Martinelli was much better, Mourinho was pretty good as well, I thought, at points, and of course Odegaard, and he is just an incredible player, and he got his assist that he deserved in the end, yet again picking up them half channel spaces like we said. Real Madrid not getting out to him, they give him way too many touches here. This is kind of unforgivable in my eyes, and it's kind of one of them moments where I think Real Madrid don't really think he's going to shoot because there's a guy, I think it's Asensio, a bit deeper, which makes sense. I don't think there's that much of a gap there for Myles to shoot, and they kind of just don't really expect him to make a good pass. He makes a great pass into Mourinho, who peels off, which I think again was another thing that we had kind of spoken about, and we've seen Odegaard do it a lot in games, but with his finishing recently, I'm kind of glad that he was a bit wiser here, and maybe that's something as well Arteta has looked at, because it's something we've all spoke about, and I think Mourinho, and this is a brilliant finish, and I think he's actually been on fire recently, so I think that is something else being played into it. And defensively, I do want to talk about him as well, because there was a few moments where I think the ball was lifted into him and he had to bring it down. He's obviously got Rodrigo on him and then Modric coming in after, and the fact he was able to calmly take that ball away, carry that ball, physically beef them off the ball and be so good was insane. There was a few tackles he did in the second half as well, but he gets his body around there. They might be a bigger player than him, someone like Bellingham for instance, and he's able to just get a foot in there and just calmly take that ball away over and over and over again. I don't even know if this is his best performance at this point. It's definitely one of the most outstanding ones, and one of the ones we'll probably all remember because of the game it was, but he's consistently now, he's putting top performances week in, week out for the team, and he is a risky player. He's going to take risks on the ball, he's going to take risks off the ball sometimes, but Arsenal need that, quite frankly, to have that attacking nature. And when we've got more of an inevitable attack, I would say, even though in this game I thought it was pretty decent at times, I do think that these risks will play a lot of a factor of Arsenal scoring way more goals next season. And I do think when he comes into that middle and inverts next to the DM, who will probably be Zubimendi, it looks like next year, it might work very well with him being the guy, a carrier, the physical one, the one that plays in between the lines, and then Zubimendi being the one that is the passer, the one that's a bit deeper, the one that can help the defense a bit more, can be what sort of a system that is figured out. And obviously we'll go into Rice, I think, a lot more into the Rice video, which obviously was before this, but Myles Lewis-Skelly, I think, deserved a shout out for this game. And of course we just want to look at some of the stats. So first, let's look at his heat map. You can see that he had a lot of impact into them half channels in attacking areas. That is not a left back, that is someone that is playing some left centre mid, basically next to Rice, allowing Rice to get forward. And I do think in this game, it's one of them games where the left hand side worked incredibly well. It has been getting better over the last couple of months, I think, but with Saka playing, we really saw the best effect to it. Saka took players away, gave them a little bit more space, and Rodrigo was not marking them areas, and we really took that. And I don't think that other players in that left back role could have done the job that Myles did today. And of course, the actual stats, he made 54 out of 57 passes, created 2 chances at a 0.27 XG, obviously got an assist, and you can see the passes that he made, incredible ounce of attacking passes and line breaking passes in forward areas there, which is insane. He made 1 successful dribble, 8 passes into the final third, which is incredible. And then defensively, yet again, putting that effort in, he won 4 duels, he lost 3, 1 block, 1 clearance, 1 headed clearance, 2 tackles won, 5 defensive actions and 3 recoveries. A brilliant performance by someone that is 18 years of age, the second youngest player to ever start a knockout game this far into the competition, English history, behind obviously Jude Bellingham, who we played against. And I just don't think the things that he is doing are in reality anymore. He is on another level of good, and I do think there is always a future with him in midfield, but he ultimately doesn't really play like a left back in this squad. He plays as a midfielder, you could say, and if he's getting the best out of him there, then maybe that will be where he can stay, because he was brilliant for England as well in that role. So I do think the future of Myles probably will be here. I still think Arsenal need to buy different left backs maybe, and maybe change it up a bit, but Myles has always got a future there, and what an incredible day to do it in. I thank you guys for watching. Please go and watch my video for Rice earlier if you haven't, and of course there'll be more videos in the coming days about this incredible result. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you on the next one.